Reading from the Gospel of John. I'm not reading all 45 verses, or all 44 verses, but we'll be here all day. But it's the story of the raising of Lazarus, and these are the key verses, I think, of the message that Jesus is trying to put forth. Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. And Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upwards and said, "Abba, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, and his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Then from Paul's letter to the Romans, the Church of Rome. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. For this reason, the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. And those who are in the flesh cannot please God. But you are not in the flesh. You are in the Spirit, since the Spirit of God dwells in you. Anyone who does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. But if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life because of righteousness. If the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also, through his Spirit that dwells in you. Thus ends the reading of the word.
Thanks be to God.
You know, when I read the Ezekiel passage, this image of the skeleton dance came into my. It was a skeleton dance cartoon that was produced by Walt Disney back in 1929, and that's what comes to mind. I had this picture of the skeletons dancing. You know, they fall apart, the bones come apart, and they come back together again. And one of the skeletons plays another skeleton like a marimba. Anybody remember that? Yes. 1929. I actually found it this morning on YouTube at 4:30. I swear I sat there and I just chortled. But that's what comes to mind when I think of this story of Ezekiel and the valley of the dry bones, and the references that the commentators want us to be absolutely moved by this story when we realize how many times the word spirit, the word breath, appears in that passage. In those 14 verses, the word breath, the breath of God, the ruach, the Spirit of God, appears 10 times in that passage. That God is breathing life and breathing life into this valley of the dry bones. It's a story that the latter verses, 11 through 14, tell us that this is a story that reveals the condition of the community of the Israelites in the exile. Ezekiel is a prophet who is preaching to the people in the exile. They have lost their country. They have lost their temple. The temple has been destroyed. The city of Jerusalem has been destroyed. And the people have been marched into exile into another land. Ezekiel is saying, you may feel like you are a community of dead and dry bones, like you are corpses with no hope. But your God is a powerful God. Your God will breathe life into you once again. Your God will return your life, restore your life, forgive all of the past. Your God has that kind of strength and spirit. The Spirit of God, the very breath of God, will restore your life. The John passage, as many read it, they see it as the precursor to the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. But the story serves more importantly to convince Martha, Lazarus' sister, about how important it is to have faith in Jesus Christ. To understand that Jesus is God's instrument to glorify God. Did I not tell you, he says, that if you believed, you would see the glory of God. If you believed, you would see the glory of God. Now, Martha has been in tears. She and Mary have both been in tears because Lazarus died. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. They called Jesus and said, come quickly because Lazarus is ill and he's dying. Please come and be with us and make this all go away. But Jesus did not come at the time before Lazarus' death. This powerful, powerful story has to do with how God, indwelling in Jesus Christ, will be glorified by his actions. John's Jesus calls us by those words to be spiritual beings. Martha, 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 you've given up hope. Martha, 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 you wanted to be in control. You wanted me to get here. You wanted me to fix it. Martha, 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 believe. Believe. And God will be glorified. John's Jesus wants us to be those who believe, not just those who say we believe. I see people who come to church because it's something to do on Sunday. Oh, by the way, you may get mad at me. I see people who come to church because it's something to do on Sunday. I've actually heard church members say that the most important part of Sunday is the visiting with friends and having fellowship together. They do the due diligence of attending the worship service, but what is really on their mind is whether or not the food is ready in the fellowship hall. When Paul writes to the folks in the church in Rome, he cautions that those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit. Now you think that sounds very logical. And perhaps you think that I'm talking about people who frequent body houses and strip joints or are just sexual, sensual human beings. No, I'm not talking about people who go to Hooters and hang out. Paul Ottermeyer refers to those who dwell in the flesh as those who are self-idolaters. That is, I live as if the only thing of importance is what I want and what will gratify my needs, be they physical needs or psychological needs. My ego requires validation. I must be the one who is right. I must be the one in control. This is living in, by, and for the flesh. It is what happens when we make ourselves the center of the universe. Have you ever gambled and won? You know, everybody in the first service went. that people get from the thrill of thinking we have duped the machine. We've snookered the rest of the players at the poker table and the blackjack table. But it's all a sham. The thrilling feeling is real, yes, but it can never, ever, ever be duplicated. I think that is why there are people who become addicted to gambling, because they are searching for that first feeling of triumph. That first feeling they had when they very first won the very first time. But what happens in truth as they lose and lose and lose again, amounts greater than their winnings ever were, is that there is a brief sigh of relief only that they got a little back, that not all is lost yet. We are human, and we seek validation from the cosmos, from the everyday world, that who we are and what we are matters. We want to feel useful and significant in the world. We want to be recognized by our peers for our efforts. But Jesus teaches us, and Paul teaches us, and yes, even that wild man Ezekiel teaches us, that the way that leads to life and purpose is to live as spiritual beings in response to the leading of God. We are to live as people of faith who believe that God is seeking to be glorified in us. God is seeking to be glorified in you. God is seeking to be glorified in me. God is seeking to be glorified in us. In our work, in our love, in all that we do. But we have this tendency to spend time seeking for us, to be glorified in us. Maybe that is why so many celebrities live lives that are in shambles. They believe in nothing but themselves. They are made the center of the universe by those who fawn over them, and their perspective gets thrown off because they cannot grasp spirituality. They cannot grasp being in the Spirit. They cannot grasp being a person of the Spirit. Confess it. Confess it. There are some of you who have spent years going through the motions of church. There are some of you who are no closer now to being spiritual beings than you were when you were children. There are those of you who still see church as a political realm, a place where you can come to work the room or the parking lot, to lobby for what you think the church should be and do. It is such a place if we allow it to be such a place. If we are not spiritual beings, but beings in the flesh, intimidated by those who see themselves as power brokers in the church or just an annoying presence. There are those who say that the church is just another nonprofit charity to support. It is, if we allow it to be. If you are apart from it, not involved in it, caring for Christ's church, with your full participation, your sincere prayers, your loving service, and your faithful witness, then yes. If you are not doing that, then it is just another nonprofit charity to support. Just another business that requires a regular infusion of your hard-earned cash. I guarantee you that there are people who view the church in exactly this way. There are others who see the church as a local ATM, expecting that we have coffers full of dough to just hand out at the door. For many, the church is just a rusty, dusty, boring old institution. That is, until they are in crisis and need someone to listen to their woes, soothe their tears, and comfort their sorrow. My friends, the church is not Rotary International. The church is not the Masons. The church is not the Lions. The church is not Kiwanis. The church is not my domain. The church is not your domain. It doesn't matter how long you have been a member here, the church does not belong to you, and it was not put here to serve you. You who are among the faithful, you know who you are. You are to serve the church. The church does not revolve around you. That is what Paul is trying to teach the Romans. That is what is behind the two very powerful stories of the Valley of the Dry Bones and the raising of Lazarus. When we oust the Spirit from the church and become its rulers, the church dies. When we become the law unto ourselves and do not defer to the Spirit of God in all that we do, we are writing the last will and testament of a body that left behind being church a long, long time ago. I'm included in this. I'm not apart from it. I'm just as confessional in my statement when I say, it is time for me, it is time for us to get off of our high horse and start serving the purposes of God, not our own. Indeed, when we default to that place where we are the center of our own universe, we need to search for and find that spiritual reset button that gets us on track as followers of Jesus Christ. And it may be something as simple as taking a deep breath and breathing in that Spirit of God, particularly that is here and in this place. It may be just turning our eyes to God and addressing God first and saying, God, be in me. God, be in my heart and be in my mind and in my thinking all of the time. God, create in me the spiritual person that you want me to be. I know and I confess that I want to feel the thrill of your Spirit renewing my life every moment. Reset me, God. Reset